I tried to visit as many cities in Italy in 8 days as possible with some caveats, but it didn't all go to plan. However, I had an amazing time, so let's go through the journey, starting off, of course, at the airport. So it wasn't actually one airport, or two, or three. It was four. And the first one started off with someone's missing crochet hook, and I felt so bad for them, and it kind of triggered me because that's the one I'm currently using. But the reason there were so many airports is because we had a layover in London, then we flew to Rome, then we took a separate flight to Torino so that we could then take a 2-hour drive into Cervino, which is our first spot. Yeah, we started off with a crazy itinerary. I don't know why I thought I could drive 2 hours after all those flights, but thankfully with some naps on some of those, it managed to work out. This drive was crazy. I mean, driving in Italy is crazy, but there were no lights, there were so many tunnels. Some of the tolls were just not labeled at least well for a foreigner, so I was very confused, but thankfully it eventually worked out. I just want to show you that there are so many tunnels, that the roads up the mountains were insane, especially with the snow. I'm nauseous and I'm driving. And although we were tired, we were stressed out from the drive, and everything just felt like it was falling apart, it was so worth it because this was the views in the morning the next day. It was so peaceful. There was no one out, and you could hear the rivers, and it was just snowing, and it was just the perfect time to just journal and then also do some tatuis. We then went ahead and grabbed our skis, and then I noticed that they use sand for their snow to give it more friction, and I'm sure this is common around places, but I have never seen that, and I thought it was so cool. After that, we hopped into the little gondola and headed up the mountain. The journey up was very long, but it was stunning. These were the most beautiful mountain views ever. And then once we got to the top, my reality hit and I realized I was probably about to get very injured. Listen, I have skied before. I'm pretty confident in my skiing skills on man-made hills, but on Alps, yeah, no. However, I know my place and I stuck to the easy hills, but this wind was painful and limited visibility. After skiing a few slopes, we then headed all the way to the top. We knew we couldn't ski there, but we wanted to see the views, and it was so worth it. Well, it was worth it until this happened. No. I will throw this brick at you. Those.
You can barely walk.
I can't. I regret bringing him on this trip. But once the snowball fight was over, I went ahead and took in the view, and I mean, look at how beautiful that is. What's even crazier is that isn't even as high as you can go. You can go even higher, and of course we did, because those ski lift tickets were way too expensive not to. And up here, it is just stunning again, but I'm also looking at these slopes, and I'm like, how are people doing this? How are you skiing down this in this weather? Granted, we heard a lot of helicopters. There were a lot of people being rescued that day. After coming back down to the slopes we could actually handle, we went skiing again. Oh, me too. Hold on. Okay, skis, we can stop. So the next day we originally were planning on hiking or doing something in the mountains, but that definitely was not going to happen with the way that the snow was, so we decided to just do a last-minute road trip to Milan. On the way down the mountain, we could finally see the views with the sunlight out, and it was stunning. Again, it is just adorable little cities inside the mountains, and you just go up and down the mountains, and it's just a little fun adventure. Milan was about 2 to 3 hours away, so after that drive, we just walked around the city. I had no itinerary for here, so I just quickly googled what the most famous things were and we just visited them. The one that stood out to me the most was this right here. I believe it's called the Galleria, but it is the mall and it is stunning. If I could get the roof of my house like this, please and thank you. Driving here was such a disaster. I felt like I was driving on sidewalks when I should have been on roads and vice versa, but eventually getting here and taking in the beauty, it was so worth the stress of the drive. I would just Google the next monument and we would just walk over to it, and I found these adorable little Lego lights, and then we visited a castle, the city center, just a bunch of places. What was really interesting is a lot of the architecture just had different styles and different like centuries in it, so you could can see here, there was the white walls, the brick walls, this orange layout, and it was just so amazing to see. We also took a little stroll in their park, and it was an adorable little way to get through the city to then visit this monument. This is the Porta Sempione, and after visiting it, we walked behind an adorable little floof, and then we headed back out of the city and headed towards Torino. The one thing that popped up on the itinerary that I was like, we're absolutely not doing that, is a cemetery. But turns out the cemetery was the most beautiful thing because we drove past it on our way out. We ended the day with the road trip back to Torino, dropped off the car, and ended up in this fog, which seems to be a theme for this airport because we left in it and we came back to it. My biggest fear was that the daylight was also going to have fog, but thankfully it was a clear day, so we headed on over to what I was most excited for, which were the markets. In the markets, there's a food market, there's a fruit market, there's a pretty much everything you could think of has a little market, and it was adorable and I enjoyed it so much. I enjoyed walking around and seeing all of the things, but also it was decorated and I found a lot of really interesting like historical pieces in it as well. Once we filled our stomachs with some amazing food, we headed out to the actual market itself, and of course I was attracted to the fruit market because I'm obsessed with fruit and I found some of my favorite fruits as well as some that I had never tried. However, because we were traveling and because I was going to be moving to a different city, I just was not able to grab the ones I wanted to grab. After that, we just walked around the city and just took in the views. We also passed by a few monuments and things like that along the way, and then we made it to what I was very excited about, which was the Egypt Museum. I'm obsessed with history and love learning things, so seeing all of these, seeing all the pottery pieces, also the mummified remains, which I obviously didn't show because I think it's really weird that you took someone out of their burial site and put them on display in a museum in a completely different country. I don't know, that might just be my opinion. However, I am going to show off all of the rest of it because I thought all of the carving and the intricate work to design everything else was amazing. And you can see all of the detail, and what was really interesting was seeing the evolution of hieroglyphics and just language in general. We also found a lot of the pieces that they would put inside the burial sites and all of the other little pieces of pottery, and as well as how they used to garden back in Egypt. Honestly, this museum was just filled with a lot of things and a lot of details, and it was just such a fun experience. And after that, we headed back into the city and headed to the park. A theme across this video is that Italy is very much under construction right now, so a lot of this park was, but we found these adorable animals which we could not figure out what they were. We were like, are these beavers? Do they just have a giant rat problem? We didn't know. However, I did have a Cinderella moment with a squirrel.
Oh my god, the squirrel scared me. I was like, what? Oh my god! Wait, there's actually... Hi, sir. No?
There was enough chaos going on, okay? Why would you even ask that? But we ended up finding a duck pond as well, and then we just continued to stroll around the park, and we found another little like castle fort, and of course it was under construction. We then made our way back to the train station because it was time to depart to our next city, and along the way on the train I decided to do some totoris because there is nothing better to fill the time on the train, especially when there's barely any service. This day started in Bologna with amazing donuts. However, the goal for the day was to go to Maranello and Modena to look at cars. And being as I was traveling with a dude, I obviously had to look at not just any cars, but luxury cars. And we started off with Ferrari. These are Ferrari, right?
About cars, all I can tell you, that's a light, that's a wheel, tire, brakes. Oh, jeez.
Okay, I might know how to change a tire, change the oil, whatever, but I just do not understand luxury cars.
Oh, and then I know this one. That's where you fill the gas, not me.
Okay, I read the signs and got a little bit of the history, and I thought it was really, really cool, the just evolution and the creativity behind these cars. But I still just don't get it.
There's not that much space in there, but that's okay, because you've got little storage. What is that one?
They're vents.
For,
Okay, so you know how we have radiators?
oh, there's storage down here too.
Yeah, he was so excited and was just telling me all of these facts, and I was just kept messing with him, but I was obsessed with the fabric and learning about the process behind all of the leather.
See, I would make a little purse out of that car, but it's not feasible. No headlights, no driver, no passenger. perfect. Just decor.
We kept looking at more cars and I kept making jokes because he makes fun of my museums, I make fun of his cars.
I'm just a girl. What that needs to be. Wait, why does that one then have rims and this one doesn't?
It was at this point that our plans fell apart. As we were heading to the next museum, we realized that there was nothing that would take us there, so we ended up heading back, but at least we saw an iridescent Tesla. We finally managed our way back to Bologna and we took a little break and then we walked around the city. We visited the town center and just a bunch of the buildings in the area, and then we walked over to the archaeological museum, which had a beautiful entrance. Not only did it have this beautiful entryway, but it also had a bunch of artifacts. There were rocks, there were stones, there were marble pieces, just a variety of things from history. There are so many pieces in this museum that just made you go, wow, someone built that.
So cool. Someone literally went and put every single, like, that must have taken forever.
After that, we headed back to the hotel and called it a day, but the next day was also very eventful. We basically went to all of the city center and all of the monuments, but in the daytime, so we could actually see them. You can see that they are just these beautiful buildings that just kind of create one town center, and then after that, we got some breakfast pizza, and then we kept walking around. We initially had 2 days for Bologna. We had one day that was going to be all of those car museums, and then we had the second day, which would be walking around Bologna. But because we didn't end up going to the car museums the day before, we walked around the city, so we kind of just had nothing to do this day. I feel like we could have tried to go to another city or even tried the car museums again, but it just didn't end up working. So instead, we enjoyed the architecture, the funny and the creepy. And of course, we had to enjoy gelato, so we went to this ice cream place that had these beautiful pastries, and of course, we got some gelato. I've been wearing the same sunglasses for the past 10 years, and I finally splurged on myself and made some sunglasses. I actually custom made them and had them shipped back to the States, but this is also when I discovered a very interesting thing.
I did not know you could negotiate sunglasses.
I was so annoyed because had I known, I would have haggled better. But anyways, we ended up taking the train and going on to our next city, Venice. We landed very late in Venice, so the next day I tried to show you guys the view because it was absolutely stunning, and I could not for the life of me figure out this window. I think it was just rusted shut or something, but it was such a beautiful view, so I risked my phone and stuck it out the window. I don't know why I called this a view. It's definitely not a view compared to what we'll see later, but it's just a cute little seating area with beautiful plants. Anyways, back to the actual views. We got ready and went to Venice. Venice is beautiful. I love the canals, the walkable city, the way that the buildings are made. Everything is beautiful. So we just walked around and just took in all of the views. We then got to our first destination, which again was a fruit market. It just had an amazing assortment of fruits and vegetables and just beautiful colors. Honestly, I was so tempted to grab them this time, but again, we were about to ride on a train and I did not want to carry those. One thing I was told to be mindful of is the flooding, and this is the area where we started to see that the water levels were rising, but people were just chilling in it. I don't think they were bothered at all, which made me a little bit more comfortable, but I kept my eye out because there were some places where there was a lot more flooding. And this is where the most tragic event happened. I was robbed, okay? A seagull snuck down and stole my pizza, and it was the most disappointing, saddening moment of this entire trip. It probably ruined the trip for me. Okay, no, there was something else that ruined the trip for me, but honestly, I was really sad about that pizza. What actually kind of ruined this moment for me was the cold. It was so cold. I was wearing my gloves, my hoodie, my everything, and we went inside the palace, and I thought, some of the rooms would be warm, heated. None of that. This place was frigid, and so we had to tour things super quickly because I was freezing to death. And inside the palace dungeon is where I found the perfect cell for that seagull, although I'm pretty sure it could escape through the bars. After visiting the palace, we headed on over to a museum, and it was filled with so many interesting artifacts. It was kind of like a library, so it had a bunch of documentation like maps, globes, written newsletters, printing press stamps. It was so interesting.
Bucks if you find United States.
Same as how I struggled with the pronunciation, he struggled to find it because we could not figure out how to read that map. The artifact that intrigued us the most were these printing press panels. As you can see, they look like they're going to be decorative and they're just for decoration and a map, but then you look closer and it's actually Arabic.
Read that last row. No harakat, you got this.
neither of us even bothered trying to read this. The other one was the most interesting, and this was the funniest because we were just like, how did they get so detailed with that?
Wild gravy boats, but the wildest one.
Like, who is serving gravy to their guests with that? Now, going back to the normal parts of this place, there were just a bunch of rooms that all had little themes and were adorable and just had some of the old-timey architecture. And after the visit to the museum, we did what was considered my favorite thing of the entire trip, which was riding the canal boat all the way back to our hotel. It was freezing, but these views were out of this world and beautiful, so just enjoy. And after that, we took the train to our last city in Italy. And in Rome, obviously, the first stop is the Colosseum, so we headed on over there. And once we were there, we actually got the underground experience, which I was super excited for because I've always wanted to see the underground and how the Colosseum was built. One thing I noticed is it is very difficult to tell what is original to the Colosseum and what was reconstructed without having to ask deliberately about each little piece. But I think my assumption is that some of these arches were original, and then the ones that are like newer looking bricks are not. We actually found out that this was gated off because the people building the metro system accidentally dug into the Colosseum. We then used the stairs that they used to use to go from underground to above ground to get us back to the top and to get the views from the outside. And these were views. I mean, look at how beautiful it is. I just can't wrap my head around the fact that people built this back then before the tools that we have now. After admiring the Colosseum, we then headed over to all of the surrounding buildings, essentially the old city around Rome. And in all of my travel, I have never met a road this annoying, but I just kept tripping on these rocks. They need to get rid of them. I know they're historic and stuff, so I respect that, but no thank you. We did find an olive tree with olives, and then we just took in some more of those views. There was so much city to explore, and when they tell you you can't do it all in one day, they mean it, because we were like running to get to everything because we only had one day. And I mean, I had been to Rome before and I have done this before, but I still have not, in the 2 trips that I've gone, covered everything that was available. And it was a very peaceful walk until moments like this.
What happens if I just throw this in something?
That's my water.
I'm gonna throw this in something.
Yeah, that's my water, dude.
Okay.
My DNA.
Yeah, I was worried that my TNA would be tracked to his little shenanigans and get me in trouble. And if you're wondering why he was thinking like this is why.
I don't have a phone.
I have my charger.
Dude can't live without his phone. But after we went around all of the Colosseum and the neighboring buildings, we then just walked around Rome and just explored all of what it had to offer and all of the other monuments and places in the city. And since this was our last official day in Italy, we obviously had to grab souvenirs and gifts and things like that. So we hit up some chocolate places as well as some other fancy Italian places. We also found the Trevi Fountain, which was unfortunately closed. But after that, we headed over to our last layover. Somehow every time I travel to Europe, I end up with a layover in London, and this just happened to be 9 hours, so I was going to take full advantage of it. So cute. First, I was going to admire all of the adorable doggos on my walk to Birdcage Walk, which is my first stop because I love going there to admire the fig trees and also just all of the nature and wildlife that is there. Now, here is the fig tree. Actually, I think there's 2, but you can see there are some figs on there, but they're unreachable because I think humans and obviously the birds have grabbed all of the reachable ones. The reason I love this tree is because I can't get over the fact that there's just fig trees in public London. Birdcage Walk is really close to the Buckingham Palace as well as Big Ben and the London Eye, so we went ahead and just visited those as well because why not? And while visiting the London Eye, the tide was really low so we could see the ground, and there were so many bikes. Was there something I was missing? Like, was I supposed to toss a bike in there? Because why were there so many? After that, we just headed around the city and we grabbed some food for our flight back, and then we went to my favorite place in London ever, which is borough market. I don't know what it is about just having a bunch of small businesses in a small area, and it was festive since it was decorated for the holidays, but they have so many tropical fruits that I've never heard of or tried, and I'm obsessed with going and trying new ones every time. After exploring all of the fruits in the little boutiques, we then headed back to the airport and onto our flight and headed home.